Hey guys, how's it going? Mr. Lee here again. This is just a quick PowerPoint lecture again that I'm going to upload to my YouTube for you guys to check out. Is regarding just high pressure lines and the actual mechanical nozzles that are used in the pump line and nozzle type diesel injection systems, right? So we've learned a lot about the common rail electronically controlled, like either piezo or solenoid type, but this is strictly mechanical. Okay, so regarding the high pressure lines, high pressure diesel fuel lines, just like your GDI, are made of formed stainless steel. Right, so obviously you will not see anything made of plastic or anything else. Just way too much pressure. You're looking at least 2,500 psi, upwards of 20,000 and up psi under load. Right. So on systems that use these pump line and nozzle setups, the length and diameter of each line going to each nozzle must be the same. This is very important, right? Because what happens is, if you think about it, if each tube or each high pressure line, right, has a different length, then the amount of time it takes for the fuel to travel to the nozzle, and also the injection, the quantity of fuel going to the nozzle will vary, right? You don't want that, right? So you want each line to have the same length and diameter, right? Another thing too, if you're working on these types of systems, it should be pretty clear that you do not want to bend or kink these lines accidentally. If you're routing them incorrectly, you don't force them, right? From my experience, when I'm working on high pressure injection systems with all the different lines I have to run into each bank and from the pump and whatnot, it's always good to these unions here, right? Just thread them on and keep them kind of loose. Even the hold downs themselves, right? As we'll talk about these in a second, but just keep everything kind of loose. Just catch a couple of threads on each of the lines before you start snugging everything down, because this way it allows all of the lines to move freely. You do not want to kink or bend these lines, because if you kink them, obviously that would affect the amount of injection quantity and the fuel delivery in each line. Another thing, so though not visible to the human eye, under pressure, the high pressure lines do expand, right? Even though they're made of steel, you're talking 20,000 plus psi, they will move, they will buckle a little bit, right? The high pressure lines do expand when high pressure diesel flows through them. Okay, so that's why it's very important. If you see these, this is just one particular example, but these looms or these clamps in the middle where all the high pressure lines are clamped together, it's actually rubber. It's like an ice like a rubber damper kind of thing. These lines are secured with vibration absorbing insulators. These lines can crack if not properly secured. So don't just improvise, and let's say you can't put this back properly because you didn't line them up properly, you just throw this in the garbage. No, you make sure you put all the looms back correctly. Okay, having the same length again for each pressure line is very important. This affects injection lag. Injection lag is defined as the time delay that occurs between the start of fuel pressurization and the moment when injection actually occurs. Okay. In mechanical injection pump systems, either plunger type, distributor type, whatever the ones we've talked about in class, having unequal length high pressure lines will vary the delivery quantities and injection timing of the nozzles. That's a bad thing. You do not want that. It is important that you do not mix up or kink the high pressure lines during removal and installation. Right, this is just an old TDI just showing you from the injection pump how they have to bend and take all these strange paths just so that the overall length of each tube will be the same. Okay, that's very important. Okay. This is just an example of one of the more popular, commonly used mechanical nozzles, right? Though this is not on modern diesels, which utilize common rail, but in the past, this would be a very good and generic example of what a diesel mechanical nozzle looks like. Okay, so the most common type of nozzle is known as the closed needle valve type nozzle, and this means it does not inject when the needle is seated. Okay, so when the needle is closed, there's no fuel flow. Okay. Essentially, this type of injector consists of two parts. Okay, so the needle valve and the nozzle body, right? So this is the needle valve right here, and this is the nozzle body, right? Which actually will drop into this mechanical nozzle holder, right? So if you could follow my cursor right here, this area here, right, which is surrounding this needle here, this area here, the shaded area here is actually the nozzle body, right? And then in the middle, right here, the actual center is your needle valve, okay? And then on top of that will be your mechanical nozzle, sorry, this outer shell will be the nozzle holder, right? And then this this unit here will be all your injection mechanics, right? Your spring and the shims that may or may not be here, your circuitry, all the annular hydraulic passageways which allow high pressure fuel to enter and leak back to your return line, right? So here's a video. Maybe we'll watch this together in class, but these are the main parts, a diagram of the main parts of the injector, right? So here would be your fuel inlet, your high pressure fuel inlet. So this will be coming from your high pump, right? This other outlet here, this would be your leak back, your back leakage, your return fuel essentially. Okay, and I'll explain that momentarily, right? This would be your pressure spring, adjustment shims. So there are some injectors that don't use shims. You actually can crank. There'd be like a preload adjuster, like you're preloading a spring on a strut, if you can visualize that. But in case of shims, adding shims will actually crush this, will preload this spring a little bit more, which will bump up the actual pressure. This spring will dictate the opening pressure of the nozzle, meaning this spring will determine how much pressure has to enter the bottom of this cavity here to push the needle upwards against the spring. The stronger the spring, the harder it will be for this hydraulic pressure to overcome the spring. Okay. Obviously, this is the body. This is the nozzle body. This area here, the nozzle body is this silver piece that you would get in, say, a rebuild kit. This is clearly an injector rebuild kit, right? What happens is, let's see here. Okay, so this is the nozzle body, an exploded view. This clearance here, where the needle meets the actual nozzle body, this is what usually wears out over time, right? Which would increase your leak back, the amount of fuel leaking back, right? Which will affect your actual output quantity and pressure. Again, this really fine machine seat for your pintle to sit actually at the end of the nozzle, that's also an area that can wear out as well, and debris and carbon can build up here, which can cause the nozzle to dribble and leak down, right? So these are two potential areas of failure, right? And also these things will wear, right? The actual clearance here, it will wear over time, and that's how your nozzles will lose output pressure, right? Another point here, as you've seen by this really gruesome picture here, diesel injectors run from just a startup, you're looking at least 2,500 psi just to start up the engine, upwards of 20,000 psi, just to let you know this will sever all your limbs. Okay, so you don't want to be checking for leaks like with your fingers, kind of touching the high pressure areas, trying to see if you feel any fuel. You don't want to do that. Okay, just to let you know the clearance here, you're looking at 2 microns clearance. Typical human hair is about 60 microns. So very small abrasives and debris, as mentioned in my last unit. If your diesel filtration system is not really up to par, if you're not taking care of your engine, small abrasives can really damage your nozzle and can cause premature wear. Okay, so maybe we'll just watch this together. I don't know if the sound will show through, but
There's a Bosch injector out of a 91 Dodge Ram 12.
Okay, I'll just fast forward this. This gentleman here, he's just basically taking one of these mechanical injectors and he's going to disassemble it and then test it. I just want to show you what is involved in him testing this nozzle. Okay, so we'll take it apart. Let's see here. Right, here we go.
Sprays the fuel beside the injector nozzle.
Right, there's the needle going into the nozzle body.
Right there, just that little lip, and the pressure's enough to overcome the spring and lift the nozzle off the seat. When that happens, you've got holes and the diesel will spray out.
Right, and just in case the audio doesn't go through in my screencast, what he's mentioning there is high pressure fuel gets sent down this passageway here on the nozzle body, and once that overcomes the spring that's pushing down on the needle valve, the injector will pop. Right, that's why they call it little pop-it nozzles. They'll actually pop, and fuel will be able to spray out the finely machined orifices at the end of the nozzle there.
As soon as it relieves that fuel pressure, the spring pushes the nozzle back down again and closes it. So this is no good, so we've ordered
So he's got the brand new one in the kit here, as you can see. So he's mentioned earlier that particular video, earlier part of the video, that nozzle failed his testing, right? Usually there's a few possibilities. The output pressure is popping a little bit too soon, right? Or also he's probably experiencing some injector leak down where you'd pressurize it just on the up to the point where it's about to open, and you let the injector hold its pressure, let it like basically check, you're leaving the residual pressure inside the injector housing. And if there's something wrong with the actual needle, if it's not seating fully, you'd have leak down. If you have leak down, you're gonna be blowing a lot of smoke. You're gonna have a lot of soot and ash. You're essentially a rich mixture, right? You have too much fuel in the cylinder leaking down, right?
Look at that, all shiny and new. Just gonna lube that up.
Lubricate a little bit with the actual testing fluid.
There we go. Now to increase or decrease pressure on this type of injector to make it pop at a high.
Wait, so what he's mentioning there, in case the audio, I'm not sure if it's showing in the screencast. He's mentioning, see, that's the actual spring, right? You can actually drop in shims if necessary. When he took the original one out, there were no shims, so it could be that the spring itself, it's popping at the manufacturer recommended specification. So there would be a specification you would find in a repair manual regarding when the needle should open in terms of pressure going from into the fuel inlet, like your pump pressure, your line pressure, right? Now there's cases where if it's opening a little bit too soon, then you can drop in shims to make the injector open at a higher pressure.
Higher PSI, you have to add shims to the back of this. I know the Perkins injectors, they would have an actual adjustment on it. You can just tighten it. It's another cap. It's been a long time since I do that in really can only put it on one way.
Right, he mentions here, just in case you're wondering, this passageway, right, there's one fuel inlet, and you'll see, let me go back, I wish I took a better picture. On the other side of this nozzle body, there's actually like a disc where there's actually a dowel pin to align this intermediate disc, right, with the nozzle, with the actual mechanicals here, right. It'll line up this passageway. There's dowel pins that will line up this passageway. So this will only drop in where these join together. It'll only fit in one way. Okay. So I'll fast forward again to his the actual testing part.
Really can only put it on one way.
Right, there he is. He's dropping in the actual. See, he made it the actual dowel pins. Then he puts on the nozzle body there that holds the nozzle to the actual injector housing. Just torquing it to 50 foot-pounds. Right. So this is the spray pattern test. So once he tightens up those unions there, right. So as he squeezes this lever down, there's an actual gauge there that will show how many bar or how many psi it takes before the injector will actually spray. Right, so leak down, he just shut off the valve. He just shut off the valve there, and he's basically holding the pressure inside the fuel injector to test for leak down. As I mentioned, right, so extremely high pressures, don't be testing for leaks with your hands. You got to be very, very, very careful. Okay. So with the mechanical injection type system, where your injection pump will just basically feed one large quantity of fuel to each injector, the early way of allowing injectors to fire in multiple stages, like allow for actual pilot injection before main injection, would be an actual nozzle holder that has multiple springs, right? A lower spring rate versus one with a higher spring rate. The actual needle will act on the small spring first when line pressure is coming through, and once it overcomes this spring, it'll seal off this chamber and allow the diesel to act on the pintle and the larger spring. So on this type of injector, this was an early way to allow for a pilot injection to take place, right? This is also known as a double spring nozzle. Okay, so this is just a quick overview. We'll chat a little bit more in class. Hopefully this kind of gives you a good idea of how mechanical nozzles work. Thanks, guys.